Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Funding. Today I'm excited to be joined by Simon Tarlton from Community Chaplaincy Association, and we're going to be talking about their work in terms of supporting prison leavers as they re-enter the community. So Simon, it's absolutely lovely to have you on the podcast.
Good to be here, thank you.
I was wondering, first things first, if you could tell us a bit more about Community Chaplaincy Association.
Sure. The CCA is an umbrella body, an infrastructure organisation. So we have three principal aims. We aim to grow a network of community chaplains around the country. We support them and we represent them. The backstory is that for a long time, prison chaplains had been frustrated that they were precluded from continuing to work with people after release. So prison chaplains were saying, this is crazy. We work with these guys, we bring them on, we help them through all the ups and downs that they experience in prison, and then they leave prison and, like a whole lot of other things, they just fall off the cliff. So they were in search of an answer, and as they were in search of this answer, some people came from Canada and they said to the prison chaplains in Swansea, well, we've got this thing called community chaplaincy that works so well in Canada, why don't you try it? And it's really a mirror. It's a mirror of what happens in a prison. So, they work through the gate. They'll have a relationship perhaps with the prison chaplaincy, with the probation teams, with others, and they connect. I think there were a number of people around that work in the early stages that could see, hold on a minute, this could grow, but it might be quite slow. How could we improve that rate of growth? If we formed some sort of umbrella body that was responsible for encouraging the growth, of seeing the regional gaps, of training, supporting the members, and the Community Chaplaincy Association was born, and that's what they now do. And it's kind of grown from there. Some of our trustees of the CCA are representatives of individual members around the country. Others come from the wider criminal justice system, but that's how we work.
So it'd be really interesting if you could give us a very short overview of the current landscape of prisons, rehabilitation, and the challenges that are going on at the moment.
Sure. It's no secret. It's all over our press and the media more widely. Prisons themselves are massively overcrowded. So and that goes for the whole system. So that's the police, the courts, the prisons, the probation service. Everything is very, very creaky, I would say, at the moment. And I see that from a variety of angles, because as well as working for the CCA, I'm also a prison chaplain. So I see that, the outworkings of that creakiness, of that over capacity from the inside as well. And a lot of that has come about because the sentencing trends in this country have increased. So we're locking up more people for longer. It's important to say there is no real evidence of people misbehaving, more. It's just that society or the government or successive governments have decided, we all remember tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, and that sort of mantra, that sort of mindset has swept through, I think, the entire system, but it hasn't been matched by the resourcing necessary. We have a situation at the moment where one of the things that government have tried to do, and there have been sort of successive attempts at this, to ease the pressure on the prison service, is to let people out sooner than they otherwise would have been. Unfortunately, what that has done is it's shifted an awful lot of people from the arms of the prison service into the arms of the probation service without the necessary shift of or increase of resources. So it's a very challenging situation. And then you add into that, societal views on criminality, on people leaving prison, on, largely based on ignorance. Yes, it's all a bit of a, I don't want to go so far as a mess but I think it's a very creaky, stressed system at the moment. Fortunately, there's an awful lot of goodwill. There are an awful lot of people working in the voluntary sector of the criminal justice system who are doing some amazing work. And what they do is sort of based on a really kind of powerful vocational calling. It's much more than jobs for them. So there's a great resource to tap into, some of which is our members, some of which is, other charitable players within that area. And probably under-resourced, but also underused.
And that leads very nicely onto the work that community chaplaincy plays. Be interesting to know what the kind of specific support community chaplaincy plays for people that are prison leavers and they're trying to rebuild their lives in society.
The way community chaplaincy works is really very simple. So typically, the journey would begin in prison. And so the community chaplain will, because he has a relationship or she has a relationship with the prison, will go into the prison, will start to build that relationship with that person, man or woman, or young person if it's coming out of a youth offender institute, before they leave the institution, to start to understand one another, to understand hopes and dreams and pasts and futures and needs and all of those sorts of things. It will then continue up until the day of release, and very, very often the community chaplain outside the gate is the first person that individual will see. They'll pick them up in their car. From that day of release, some of that assistance is really practical stuff. Because it can be a minefield. It's an absolute minefield. And you've got, it's time limited. You must see your probation officer before 5 o'clock, otherwise you're going back to jail. And then the journey will continue. So, can we get you housed? Who can we introduce you to? Might want to give you a job. Where are the areas of support around about in your community that can help you? None of this is necessarily about actually delivering that help. It's about signposting. It's about introducing. It's about being the kind of the person in the middle to show you the way. And the relationship will continue for as long as it takes. Now, sometimes it's time limited because perhaps there's a pot of money that supports that work. Sometimes it's not time limited. We have members who continue relationships with people who left prison for years, literally years after they've left, and they've become great family friends. So it's all tailored towards the needs of the individual, but it's really basically simple stuff. It's about being an accompanier through the peaks and troughs of life, really.
Simple but really vital, because as you say, you can't underestimate how daunting it must be to leave those gates, and then you've got some people probably don't have anyone to support them, and just to have a friendly face that can kind of help them through those first steps and throughout must make such a difference.
Yeah, and it's and so the needs are different for everybody. We're all unique, but also so the needs, for example, for somebody who's just leaving prison after 20 years might be different from somebody who's just been in for a few weeks. will be different again from somebody who's been repeat through the system because of, the housing or the drugs or whatever it is that just keep rearing their head. So each individual, and each individual has a different set of potential resources available to them. So there might be family, but there might not be family. There might be work that's needed to be done to rebuild those family connections or rebuild that, connection back into the wider society. So every individual will be worked alongside depending on their need.
Yeah. And you touched upon it, but it would be good to understand what some of the biggest barriers might be for someone that's reintegrating into society.
Well, they're no great surprise, I don't think. And the barriers are really, I think, what I always think of as they're a reflection of what I always think as what we all need to thrive, to flourish. We need somewhere to live, we need something to do, and we need someone or something to love. Now, if you take the first one, somewhere to live, I'm not entirely sure of the precise statistic, and it will change depending on age group, gender, number of times they've been in prison, all that sort of thing. But the proportion of people who leave prison to no fixed abode is mind-blowing. I mean, 50%, 40%, something like that. And it will go up depending on time of year and other circumstances. So, and that's very often the cause of a reoffending pattern, because we just keep kicking these people out of prison with nowhere apart from the streets to live in. So that's one of the challenges. Something to do, helping those people re-engage. That might be paid work, but equally it's just that feeling that we're useful again. That people see us and they think, oh, here's somebody who's contributing to society. It's a really important fundamental need of ours. And then the third thing is that something to love and to be loved by. I think, again, that speaks about a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, a sense of being close to others, wider society. And that may be faith, and that may well, be faith. They're the three, I would say, main barriers. Practical stuff, where to live, what to do, and then that third but equally important thing: how do I feel loved, and how do I start to engage with that idea of love again?
Yeah. Some people will have the opinion that people that have committed an offence maybe perhaps don't deserve a second chance. How would you respond to that? And what have you seen that could potentially challenge that belief?
Well, I would always answer that question firstly from a Christian perspective. I'm a Christian, I'm a priest, I'm a chaplain, and that's the basis and the root of all my my understanding. And the Gospels are very clear about how frequently we ought to be prepared to forgive. 70 times 7, we're told. If you look at the prison population overall, these are really, really rough statistics. They're not even statistics, they're rough kind of ideas. When you look at people who are in prison, I would say that there are probably about a third of them in prison who jolly well need to be there to protect themselves and to protect society. There's about a third of them who they're there. We could probably find something else to do with them, a different option. And there's a third there who just simply ought not to be there. That prison isn't the right response. But however you break that down, the vast majority of people are in prison or in contact with the criminal justice system in some way because of of one or a series of bad decisions. And sometimes those bad decisions are made because they weren't quite in their right mind for whatever reason. Some of those bad decisions are made because something very negative happened to them to provoke the wrong reaction. And a large number of those bad decisions are made because of a series of adverse circumstances within their previous lives. Born into poverty, born into a household which knew violence, all of those adverse childhood experiences, they're massively overrepresented within the prison system. Autism, massively overrepresented in the prison system. Neurodiversity generally. It's much, much greater representation of neurodiversity in the prison system than in the general population. So we have to start, as I think, as a society, thinking much more widely about and asking ourselves the questions, why? How did this happen? What went wrong? Because when we all look at a little, newborn, innocent and perfect and beautiful, and something in between then and now has clearly gone wrong. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to discount the fact that there are some people in prison who I'm very, very pleased that they're there. But we need to think a bit more hard about why all the others are going there.
It's a really good response, because I think it is easier sometimes to think in black and white, isn't it? But there's a, as you say, an array of different reasons why that might happen. And kind of leading on from that, do you think that there is a role that community can play in terms of helping prison leavers to reintegrate into society?
Yeah, just get more informed. I mean, just try to understand, learn more, I think, about these people. And I probably want to speak to maybe two different groups of people about that. I mean, so if I was speaking to, and I do this quite a bit, if I was speaking to a church, right, about why would you want to welcome a prison leaver into your church or into your worshipping community? They are there in search of that something to love. They are there in search of some deeper understanding and meaning for themselves, some connection to something greater than themselves. And I say to churches, why wouldn't you want that passion, that longing, that yearning for what you potentially have in your place of worship? Just think what that might do. And then the response to the wider community is that, number one, you need to consider that to lock somebody up costs, on average, around about £55,000 a year to the country. And that's an enormous waste of money. That's just the cost of locking them up, right? That's not the cost of the missed national insurance payments and the missed tax payments and the wider contribution that they could be making to society. That might actually double. We're talking about now maybe even £100,000 per prisoner that we're losing from wider society. It makes sense to me, I mean, from a moral point of view, from a spiritual point of view, an ethical point of view, but also from a financial point, an economic point of view, it's got to make sense to invest a fraction of that in, finding somebody a house, connecting them to a job, giving them the wraparound support that they need to now play an active part in society, rather than just keep locking them up. It's just a purely sensible economic answer. And so even from that perspective alone, I think we need to, as a society, understand more about the drivers that have put people in those circumstances in the first place, and engage more with what can we do as a society to reverse that flow.
No, it's a really good point. I think it just all comes back to that understanding and more awareness. And perhaps if there was more talk around prisons, prison leavers in general, that whole topic, then there would be a greater understanding and probably acceptance, I imagine. You mentioned at the start, and it'd be interesting to just explore it in a bit more detail. So we gave funding towards Community Chaplaincy Association, towards to seed fund some new initiatives in underrepresented regions. Could you tell us a bit more about that and the desired impact of that?
Sure, yeah. It was an amazing, generous gift, and we're very, very grateful for it. So, as I said earlier, the CCA has 3 objectives, one of which is to grow the network. We really, really want to see that every prison leaver, wherever they are in the country, whichever prison that they're coming out of, whichever community they're going back into, has the potential to access a community chaplain locally. And we've been able to make them, each one of them, a small startup grant, because what we identified was the fact that you may well have a group of really driven people who want to start a new project to support people who are leaving prison and coming out into their community. And but despite all that drive, as a new organisation, as a new charity, or however they've constituted themselves, there are some significant hurdles to jump in those early years, especially when it comes to attracting funding. Very few people want to fund brand new organisations. There are also early administrative costs, basic kind of laptop and a bit of office space and petrol money and all those sorts of things. So we did a lot of work in terms of identifying those needs, and we came up with this idea that we could provide with the grace of Benefact this seed corn money to say, this will get you over. Join the CCA, this will get you started. Of course, that doesn't end there. That's the money. And that helps them, as I say, in all those different ways that I just explained. And then we support you. So, and then we will, we'll help you, we'll train you, we'll provide the training to your mentors, to your volunteers in terms of understanding how this theory of change works, understanding the right ways, the safe ways to mentor, all those sorts of things. But that's what we've been using the money for, and it's really, it's achieved some great things.
It's really exciting, and we're really happy to support you. I was wondering, finally, it would be great to hear if you've got any stories that kind of highlight the impact of community chaplaincy, whether that be sort of a personal story or something along those lines.
So we have 35 projects all around the country. So firstly, it means that Fred leaves prison in Newcastle, but he lives, or his family live in Bournemouth. So the community chaplain project that we have in Newcastle builds a relationship with Fred in prison, meets Fred and he comes out, helps him through the first 24 hours, takes him to the train station in Newcastle and makes sure he's on the train to Bournemouth, where, because they've been contacting because of the network, our local community chaplain meets him at the station in Bournemouth and reintroduces him to his home community down there. And that's happening all the time because of the network.
Brilliant. Thank you. You do fantastic work, and thanks for talking to us today. It's been great to have you on.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond Funding. If you'd like to find out more about Community Chaplaincy Association, visit communitychaplaincy.org.uk and visit benefacttrust.co.uk to find out more about our grants. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels so you don't miss out on future episodes.